All right, we're going to get started, and I expect some people to come in a little bit. And we are online, if you didn't know that, so we are being recorded. So be aware of your comments. We're online, and other people will watch this later, as well as just welcome to those on our online community. We're glad that you're here. So if you're in this room, this is what we're calling Neurofabelous ministry. How to offer sensory-friendly options, and we're going to talk about what that means. But if this is not the class you signed up for, now's the time to leave. All right, so we're going to get started. So I wanted to cover, and we're going to have time for introductions. Just bear with me for a second. I wanted to just take time to tell you all that a lot of the times when there's slides up, I'm going to assume because we're adults, you guys are reading them. But sometimes I'm going to talk with what complements the slide, but not read you the slide. So basically, as we are joining together today, you can see on the slide some of our goals. Obviously, that was what was in the course description. And what we hope is to give you in your toolkit tools for creating Neurofabelous ministry in your context. And what works in my context, I know it won't work necessarily in your context. You have to work with your committees, with your leadership teams, with your staff, and figure it out for where you're at now. And we are just really trying to make sure that people are having the lens and the questions to know what to ask in your context. So when I say that my context, what I'm doing in my context might not fit for yours, is I am at a very large church. Over 1,000 members with a very large staff and the benefit of a large budget, especially because as a Lilly Grant funded project, and I'll get into that in a little bit, we have $1.2 million that's helping us bring this information outward, but we use our church as a learning lab, so I have a really big budget if I want to tap into that, right? Well, most churches are not in that situation. We have churches that are in smaller contexts. We have churches with less staff, less budget, so we try to come alongside everyone and say, what could you do with DIY? What could you do to buy things on Amazon or cheaper places? And I'll tell you more about how we can help you through Big Faith Resources. But how many of you, and this goes to our online community as well, how many of us have planned big, beautiful, meaningful church events, Easter egg hunts, and Christmas services, and vacation Bible school, and only to watch some children and families quietly step back, maybe leave early, or never return, and you don't know why? Have any of you had that? Okay, we had a smattering of hands behind you. Now, what we need to keep in mind is that when people leave or don't return, it isn't always because they don't want to be part of our church. It isn't always because they're church shopping. Sometimes it's because our very church environment becomes too much, too overwhelming. When supports and alternatives or adaptations are not provided, especially to children on the spectrum, going to church is incredibly hard. And it's not just worship. It can be Sunday school, it can be vacation Bible school, it can be a pop-up event that you have planned for months and are like super excited about, no other church is doing it, and you're like, people are gonna love this, and then you don't know why someone on the fringes left, and you're happy with who was there, but you might be wondering why someone left and not have that data point to know why, and be curious. And so sometimes some of those people have just found that what we're providing is too much. So today, we're going to hopefully give you those tools in your tool belt to explore how small, thoughtful changes can open up a wide door of belonging in your ministry context for neurodivergent children and youth and their families. And so this is not, if you're gonna write a note, write this down or save it for later, this is not about creating perfect programs, okay? Not about creating perfect programs. It's about designing programs with a new lens and bringing care and curiosity and compassion. Now you might say, Michelle, we already do that. Well, yes, but even as someone who's aware of neurodiversity, I am so new into always bringing these lenses into what we're planning, that it's very hard, even with intentionality, to kind of run through that framework of being aware of all the things that impact neurodiversity. Because, for example, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, okay? If you've met a child with neurodiversity, they probably have more than one thing on the neurodiverse spectrum. And we're gonna get into what neurodiversity is. If anyone in the room is like, what does that word mean? I will get you to the standard definition of that in just a moment. So let's take a moment, and I want you to imagine, and partly because you're here in this class, I want you to reimagine, or we're going to imagine together, how could we rework some of our beloved traditions or create something new? It's my hope that by giving you these tools in your ministry toolkit, that this workshop will give you the confidence to build ministry programs and spaces where neurodivergent children can thrive and belong to your community. So let's take a moment and do just a few introductions. And to those who are joining us virtually, go ahead and start sharing introductions in your comment thread. And those in the room, if you'll just quickly at your table, if you haven't done so already, will you introduce yourself to those seated closest to you? Tell them a little bit about yourself and how you come to this workshop today. We're just going to take a few minutes if everyone can introduce themselves. Just at your tables. Okay, I hate to interrupt all the good conversation. I kind of watched the front table, and I know I'm cutting you off, but I tried to make sure that the group with the biggest amount of people, at least everyone got to talk. That was my hope. So to those online, welcome, and hopefully you shared a little bit about where you're coming from in your ministry context. To those in the room, as you could hear the lovely conversations happening, hopefully you got to know a little bit about your table mates, where they're coming from, why they're here in the class, what they might want, like, you know, the hope of what you're hoping to leave with. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and about my coworker in the back, Brianna. So we both work at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Oklahoma City. As I said, it's a larger Presbyterian church. And we were fortunate enough as a congregation to get a Lilly grant. And so we started, it's not a curriculum company. It sounds like it in hindsight. We might not have named us the name, but we are not a curriculum company, but we are called Big Faith Resources. And we are trying to resource you all. So we launched in 2024. We do this on top of our normal day jobs in the church. So just know that if you contact us, we'll get in touch with you, but it may take a week or so. But basically, we're funded through the Lilly Endowment Incorporated. We were given $1.2 million to work with nurturing children and the family initiative that came out in 24. And we're trying to help churches look at practical, innovative tools for worship and Christian formation, but specifically where we look at neurodiverse ministry. So our pursuit grew out of this context of this deep need that we felt firsthand in our own ministry context, that there weren't practical tools, that there was a need for training and resources and support to help other congregations meet the growing call to embrace neurodiversity in meaningful and faithful ways. And so what that means is I'm a mid-career pastor, right? Came out of Union PSCE, and then later I went to Dubuque for my doctorate, and what I found is nowhere since 2001 did I ever even have the term neurodiversity, right? It wasn't like I would say, oh, I have a different kid on Sunday, or a special kid, or a kid who I was like, I know I needed to provide something different for that child, you know, back in the 90s, and I didn't have a term. And then as I came to Oklahoma City, had been mid-career in 2007, and then 2012 working in my context, then I was like, I have 10 kids that are unique, special, but now I had the terms, right? And so what I and my coworkers, why we wrote the grant was we felt like other people are in ministry, especially mid-career, but right out of seminary too, that don't have these tools and training. So it came out of the practical part. And if you were to be like, well, how do you have the authority? Like, what's your background? You're not a medical professional. Well, no, I'm not. I am a pastor and I'm a Christian educator. But because of that, I knew to go seek partners. And so I have these wonderful organizations on the board that come alongside of us, one through the Oklahoma University and also the Oklahoma Autism Network, which is huge. And they come alongside the materials we're presenting and sharing, and we're working with lead researchers and doctors. And so that's where you get that qualifications, and then it meets ministry into the practical part of where we are. So just wanted to highlight that these partnerships give us the direct access to the specialists, advice from the clinical professionals in the field, and evidence-based information from the research they're doing. So it's super exciting. When I approached these groups, I thought they'd tell me no, because so often with churches, I didn't know if they would be okay with a church partnership, and we were blessed that they immediately said yes. So, and that benefits you all. So as we are getting into the fun part, we are going to be moving today. The room's a little small, but you're not going to sit all the time. I just want you to know that. And if you're online, we're about to do a part with raising your hand. Obviously, everyone in the room can raise their hand like this. For our online people, if you can figure out your icon, if you can't figure out your icon, you can put in the chat raised hand and just interact that way, okay? So I want you to raise your hand if you work primarily with children. And make sure you look around the room at your friends. Okay. You can put your hand back down. Eventually, I'm going to stop saying put your hand back down. So raise your hand if you work I already said that one. Raise your hand if you work primarily with youth. Put your hand back down. Raise your hand if you started today with more coffee than sleep. If you've ever bribed a child with snacks at church. If you've ever tried something related to inclusion or neurodiversity in your context. If you would say that you're brand new to this conversation of neurodiversity in ministry. Raise your hand if you learn best by doing, best by talking, watching, Googling. Raise your hand if you're currently in a Lord give me strength ministry season of your career. Raise your hand if glitter has taken up permanent residence in your carpet or furniture at your church. Or raise your hand if you believe glitter never leaves and it just relocates itself. Okay, so raise your hand if you're not quite sure where to start with inclusion for neurodiverse folks. So hopefully, both online and in the room, what you've seen and gotten to know very quickly is that you're not alone. Okay, you're not alone. You have something in common with everyone else here in the room. And I'm 99% sure that if I asked you to raise your hand, if you believe that God calls us into belonging together, everyone would raise their hand. Belonging is a very important part of our life, especially our life together in the church. Knowing that we belong to God and belong as partners in Christ's service is crucial to the ministries of grace that we are each trying to live into as we lead within our congregational context and within our own spiritual lives. Belonging, acceptance, inclusion, unhindered access to God is something that actually not all people experience. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that relates to neurodiverse children, youth, and their families. But every Sunday, during our service, we stand up and we say, we'll say, you are always loved by God. Or we'll say, everybody's welcome here. But the truth is while we want to live into that, and there may even be members of my church and my staff that we think everyone belongs at our church. The truth is, if we're honest, there are people who don't feel like they belong. And we need to not lose that focus. Belonging is never-ending work. So we realized that there was especially this growing need for neurodiversity and affirming ministries that are neuro-friendly in our congregational context. Now, despite all those strides, like even if your church is being really aware of how to bring about inclusion and belonging in your context, neurodiverse and their children often face, neurodiverse children and their families often face exclusion in churches. And so one reason that happens isn't just the things that we're doing, and we'll get into that in a little bit, why organs and stuff can be like super overload. But also, there's a difference. You know, a lot of the things with neurodiversity is you look at a person and you can't see that they have a need. And so bringing these lenses help address that unseen need. Sometimes parents don't want to tell you their child's neurodiverse because they're labeled at school and they don't want them labeled in your congregation. Half of special needs parents skip religious activities due to lack of support. If you were to leave with one thing that you learned today, half of special needs parents skip religious activities due to the lack of support, not because they don't want to be there. So the impact that your ministry can have by bringing about awareness is addressing some of the biases in your own church context to strive to remove barriers so that we can ensure that neurodiverse children and their families have ways to participate in worship, in prayer, and in the congregational life without hindrance. Allowing children to fully experience and express their faith as they come to know and love God, and to be really full participants in your congregational life, where without those barriers removed, it makes it really hard. So you remember that I told you I was gonna give a brief overview for what is neurodiversity. Anybody in the room, like if I said, write down your definition of neurodiversity, would any of you been like, okay? So the biggest thing that I learned in working with Big Faith Resources, again, as a pastor coming into this, was I learned that neurodiversity is not a medical term. If you didn't know that, it's an advocacy term. It came out of advocacy. Now, there is practitioners and all this, you know, in the school systems and awareness, but it's not a medical term. Your medical term is something like autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. That's the medical term of a diagnosis. Neurodiversity is it's this umbrella term. I'll show you in a second. And it is going to cover all these vast ways that the brain thinks differently, but it's an advocacy term. So when we talk about neurodiversity, I need you to remember this. We're referring to those neurological differences that affect how children or people process information, how they interact with the world and relate to others, all due to how that individual's brain is working. So some of the things to think about when you think of, well, what is neurodiversity? It's things like ADHD and autism. But these are often ways that the inputs coming into someone's brain or a children's brain also helps them think out of the box. And it can lead to amazing insights in your ministry context. But it does require that we are incredibly flexible and provide supports to these individuals in your church. So remember I said it's an umbrella term? So if I put up all of the kinds of terms that could fit under this umbrella, there'd be like 50 up there and it wouldn't cover all of them. And what I found is when I put that umbrella picture up, you can find it online, it overwhelmed people. And so I have distilled it down to just some of your main ones. And if you come by our table, you can get a card that has this to take back with you. Not this table, but the one in the expo hall. But these are some of the most common ones. So when you're talking to your teams, they would understand these. So with dyslexia, how many of you know someone who's dyslexic? Does anybody know someone who has autism? Does anyone know anyone with sensory processing disorder? How about ADHD? Okay, do you know what dyspraxia is? Okay, some people. So what happens is when you have these different diagnoses of how their brain is thinking differently, a lot of times children don't just have one of these. They might have several of these. So let's go back up to dyspraxia. That's one that some people are like, I don't know what that one is. So that's where someone's brain is going to process their control of movement differently. It's going to impact their coordination, like tying shoes, using utensils. But where it affects your ministry most often is that is a child who might have a hard time writing neatly, difficulty executing tasks and with spatial awareness, okay? So it may affect their speech, how to learn a new task. So like if you ask them to do something, they may freeze because it's very overwhelming to be put on the spot, because they are going to be processing even their movement to get up and go get a Bible. That may be a huge task for them. Like if you think you're just involving a child, hey, go help me do this. Some children, that's a huge ask. And so we don't always know what each child is bringing into the room. Again, I said sometimes parents don't always want to share that with us. So one of the tools, and to those online, we'll be sending this to you, but those in the room, you have a sheet called All About Me. The All About Me sheet is a tool that you can use in your ministry. We will send it out to you digitally. Again, everyone online will be getting this as well. It is a tool. That's the one I use in my context. And we use, that's the one that we use with children. We have a little different color scheme for our youth. And every child in our program fills that out, so no one is called out. So it's a form we have all the time for visitors as well. And parents can fill it out, and then they choose what to tell us, but we don't single out a single child. So I don't go up to a child who I think is autistic and be like, will you fill this out for me, parents? You know, might not be the best approach for inclusion and belonging. Okay, so really quick, again, you're gonna there's so much about neurodiversity, it could have been its own. Neurodiversity 101 could have been its own class, but we're gonna get to fun stuff, so I'm just giving you like the highlights. Come find me later, come to our table, we can give you more to take back to your churches to do a Neurodiversity 101 class. But when you think about neurodiversity and you're talking to your committees, it's very, very, very helpful to think when you're talking to them about biodiversity. When you look out into nature, a healthy forest isn't just one kind of tree. There isn't just one kind of bird or one kind of flower. The strength and resilience of that, ecosystem is the diversity, and it allows that whole system to thrive. And in that same way, especially when we look to Genesis and the other stories of the Bible, we know that God didn't just create just one kind of brain either. It's not just one way of processing the world. We have thinkers, and we have movers, and we have feelers, and we have dreamers, and we have people who focus deeply, and we have big picture visionaries and sensory seekers, and we have those who are quiet reflectors. So neurodiversity is this very natural variation. When you think back to Genesis, like if you think we're made in the image of God, something about the image of God and way that God designed our brains and our bodies to work is honoring the great biodiversity in God's created world. So just like a forest, we need to honor and nurture the diversity in our community. And just remember that when you think about neurodiversity, think about it as, now this is not the best metaphor, but it's one that I use with committees, they seem to get it. I want you to think about different computers and different software. So when we are in the world, it's data and inputs coming into our brain, and different software systems on your computer, if you haven't updated, doesn't always input the data correctly, right? Like we have different softwares, and sometimes your computer screen buffers. Well, those computer systems are all unique and they all work, but the input to them is different. And so you could think of that. If the biodiversity aspect isn't landing with your congregation, maybe use the computer software idea. That can help them understand a little bit about that. So I want you then to think about, you see the statistic up there, so I'm not going to read everything. You see that statistic, 1 in 5 children is neurodiverse, okay? So that includes autism, 1 in 36, but this is neurodiversity, that huge umbrella, 1 in 5 of your children. So when you have like you call your kids forward for your children's sermon, and you have one kid that like everyone thinks is, I have a lady in my church who stopped me later, and she didn't say he's a hot mess, but she basically implied, you have that one child who's like all over the front steps. And I was like, well, let me tell you a little bit about him. So awareness is important, but you can't stop every children's sermon to let the people in the congregation or let your volunteer, well, you want to let your volunteers know, but maybe there's a reason you can't. But 1 in 5 children. That means we have to offer a lot of grace. 1 in 5 children. And that is from the CDC, okay? But I want you to stop for a second and remember that you have people in your congregation who are adults, who learn to mask all this. Here's a statistic for you. There's no slide for this, so if you're a big note taker, you're gonna wanna write this down. So neurodivergence, basically, or neurodiversity affects over 1 billion people worldwide. Neurodiversity affects 1 billion people worldwide. It's an estimated range, 15 to 20% of the global population are neurodivergent. Some just don't know it until they take a class or until they're exposed, and then they go, oh, I didn't know I might have these things. So just know in your whole context, as we think about grace, that the variations you might make in ministry aren't just helping include and welcome and help that family or that child belong, but you have adults too that can benefit when you put supports out, and youth. Okay, so now we're gonna get into some practical things. And this is a video that we designed, and I'm gonna give you a warning, okay? It is made to make you feel a little uncomfortable. And it's a little loud. It is to show you what a child with neurodiversity or child with autism is gonna walk into worship and feel. Now, this may not be the same in all your contexts, but it's hopefully gonna pull at your heartstrings and give you a little bit of awareness, but know that if you're like, whew, this is a lot, that's the point of this video, but also it will be over in 2 minutes. Okay.
Good morning. It's on herbs. It's okay. Hi, how are you? I'm so glad you're here this morning. Good morning.
Friends, welcome to worship. Would you please rise? May the peace of Christ be with you.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
I want to worship with you, but sometimes it's just too much.
So those online who didn't hear that, someone just said, oh, my heart. So online, I encourage you to interact with these same questions. So what did you notice? Talk loud. Do I need to hand them the mic? Sorry, so online people can hear. Let's get you a mic. You can talk really loud if you want until he gets you a mic. While they're getting the mic, this video is on our website where you can use it, and there's a study guide and a resource to how to use it with your church. Okay, so you can use this, and there's this whole like one-page study guide that goes with it as a training tool. Okay, someone?
I didn't know I was getting a mic, but love that. I have 2 kids with special needs of my own, and they both have sensory processing disorder. So watching that just puts it in perspective of what it's like when they come to church. We also have a separate entrance for families. It makes it easier for kids to enter the worship space because it slows down the progression in which they're thrown in. So just an idea.
That's a great idea. So what else do you notice? Anybody? It's okay if you're still processing.
So many of the things that people were trying to do to make that child feel welcomed and included were exactly the things that were overwhelming and deregulating them.
Yeah. So when we filmed this with the film company, a lot of our friends that are neurodiverse, of course, came out, wanted to be in the filming, and they realized we were kind of short on time, and we had kind of a script, and we had to cut some things, and they were like, where is the passing of the peace? It's one of the biggest triggering things for me, some of our teenagers. And so we ended up filming it last minute and putting it in because our kids and our teenagers who were there were like, you got to put the passing of the peace in. It is so hard. So in our sensory-friendly service that we have, we make the passing of the peace if you're comfortable and able, you can pass the peace, and we give alternative ways. But one of the children in our 8:15 service, from the whole time I've known him, he would try desperately, at 6 and then 8, to show people during the passing of the peace, like, that it wasn't that he wasn't interested, but like he didn't want people triggering him, and no one would respect his cues. So his cues would be passing of the peace, right? About to happen? And what would people do? People would come up, force hug, try to make him make eye contact, right? And now he's like this tall. He still does the same thing, but now people kind of more respect him. But it is amazing how with children especially, we feel, like you said, with the welcoming, right? People want to get down and almost force them and almost stop reading social body cues when it comes to our children. We don't respect the signals that sometimes they're saying, plus then they're being forced. Go ahead. Yep, self-regulation. Yep.
And
Yep.
so people go, oh, they can't sit through church. But there might be some self-regulation.
My daughter has started going to the...
Let's get them the mic. Sorry, we have an online group. We want to make sure they're hearing.
I just want to piggyback on that. My daughter has started going to the couches outside of the sanctuary before passing of the peace because it's too overstimulating for her. But what that has started is we have kind of like this back corner that her and a few other friends that don't feel comfortable passing the peace have started sitting in, which I don't love because I feel like they're self-isolating themselves. I would like people to just respect that boundary. So I'd be curious on some ideas to help people cross that bridge of respecting that boundary.
So let's save that, and I'll talk to you one-on-one about some of those things. Yeah, this is a great question. Will you just write it down so you remember, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so that kind of, we just jumped to number 5, which is fine. Like, again, these are things you can revisit later, but I just wanted to get the conversation going. So I think we all could agree that church has been kind of slow to adapt to the variety of needs and learning styles and abilities of all people, especially when it comes to neurodiversity, right? That's why you guys are here, trying to get those tools in your toolkit. With Ministries, which is based out of Texas, has done a lot of research with Baylor University. They've reported that 1 in 2 families leave church because their child with disabilities was not welcome or included. 1 in 2 families. So here's the hope. If 50% leave the church because their child with disabilities was not welcome or included, or given the supports they need, what does that mean? Well, that means that if we start offering support, so I can't guarantee that that number will shift greatly, I hope it will, but the hope is that once we begin to adapt, even in small ways, we find that those small changes, and maybe big changes, don't just help neurodiverse individuals, but they help your whole community. And what happens when you lose one family because one of their child is struggling? You actually might lose a family of 4, a family of 6. And it doesn't matter if it's, or a family of 3 or 2, you know, if it's a single parent. You still just lost more than one. But even that one is important. So part of it is starting to bring a lens of awareness to your volunteers, to your church staff. You know, we already had it kind of highlighted in the room, so I'm going to just kind of do this very briefly. But, you know, when a child is covering their ears, or they're pacing, or they're repeating language, they're fidgeting, they're lingering at the edge of the room, or someone said leaving the room, they're often regulating. They're not misbehaving. But I kind of feel like that 1950s model of the church, compliance, now we all have to go to Sunday school, you need to sit in the pew and be quiet. It is a model that is not doing any kindness to our neurodiverse kiddos or their families. One of the clearest places the churches can support neurodivergent children is around sensory needs and providing some basic supports. And so what does that mean? Well, I want you to stop and think of your sensory environment in your congregation. How many would say that on a given Sunday, your sensory environment, your worship, your fellowship hall, your Sunday schools can be busy, loud, and crowded? Raise your hand. Okay, that's pretty much all of our experiences. Now I want you to take that to the next step. Now, what about your creasters, your ones who come for Christmas and Easter, right? Like they're dropping in for like one of the first, like maybe they can't make it the rest of the year, but they're gonna come to VBS, try it maybe, or try Christmas and Easter. Now what happens there? Is your special events or holidays even louder, even busier, even more crowded, right? So we can start seeing that if we don't have the supports and tools, even a family that wants to be there, it becomes even that much harder. And as someone said, it's not just about coming into the church. Some of these transitions and hardships start in your parking lot, so that by the time that they get into your doors and then things are on max overload, think of it as the little girl in the video, her input, remember the computer idea or a stereo? We're gonna turn her volume up on smells. Imagine walking in, if she's aware of every smell, she walks into a congregation of 300 and she's smelling 300 body odors, 300 perfumes, or a child who is tuned into electricity, she's hearing the electricity in the wall. It's not something I can even comprehend because that's not how my body does input of the data. So now imagine the organ. It stops, you have a moment of prayer, and it's super quiet. And then it's like, bum, 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 bum. And I mean, you see your own adults go sometimes, right? Have you as a pastor ever like, there's a certain song and it caught you off guard? I mean, it happens. But so now just keep in mind that neurotypical children, they can ride things out, but a neurodivergent child, they need those tools and some pacing and some transition and some options. So I just want you, for interest of time, I'm gonna throw out a question and keep going, but what are practical things that we can do as educators, pastors, staff members that can help neurodiverse children and their families feel safe, grounded, and able to participate in the life of your church? That is a question you're gonna have to start asking as you plan things. Now, as you plan things, you'll notice that there's a handout, and everyone online, if it's not posted yet, you'll be getting it following this, and that anyone in the room, I'm gonna send you out a digital copy because you can use this for all your events. But if you look at your handouts, there's one that's specifically about VBS, but there's another sheet that's Church Program Seasonal Events Planning Tool. So you can run a plan through this worksheet, and some of it you can be like, I'm gonna do in a year. I can't do everything for VBS adaptations, but in a year I might try 2 more. It's gonna just run you through questions and give you some lenses of awareness that you can start applying as you're doing an event. And until this becomes second nature, until this becomes like breathing, you just keep using this tool adapt it as you want to, but it has questions in there to find blind spots. Because if you're neurotypical, you're not always aware of where the blind spots are. And the next piece is listen to your families with neurodivergent individuals. They will help you know your blind spots. But it's starting to open those lines of communication. So I want to explore how to actually, in this class, practically adapt events and seasonal moments so your neurodivergent children can participate. So really quickly, this could have been a whole class as well. Please come by our table or talk to us, visit our website, we can help you. But one of the things churches can do is to create sensory rooms. We turned our old library, which wasn't getting used, into a sensory room. It wasn't getting used so much that the books that were in there were laminated to the bookshelves. And yet, no one in the congregation, when they heard I wanted to get rid of the library, they all were like, I donated those books, right? But once they saw children in there thriving, they love it. Not every church can do a sensory room, but you might decide in your context you do. In your context, you might want to remove pews and have a calm corner in your worship space. Maybe you already have a playground that you could adapt and have sensory tools out there. These are some of the sensory tools. My church, our upstairs is a dining room. Our church is not ready to remove pews. We are very high worship, and there is an expectation to be quiet. They'll tolerate a baby, but they won't really tolerate a really wiggly elementary kid. That's just where my congregation is. But we have a full sensory worship at the same time. That's an extension. You can come talk to me about how we do that. We had a space that's as big as our sanctuary, and we live stream part of it, but we have a dedicated staff and musician down there, and we have a living room with comfortable, flexible seating, and the families love to go there. And we have families who say, if you hadn't offered this, I'd never be able to worship as a family together. But you have to figure it out for your context. But some of the things that you can provide is tools. So we don't call them toys. They are support tools. And that's probably one of the biggest things you have to tell volunteers is, and our kids lead the way. They get it. If they don't call, like if I said it once, like these are not toys, these are tools in our rooms, our kids know it, and they also know which kids might need them, and they lead the way. It's adults that I have a hard time with wrapping their head around it. So these are some of the things. You can do alternative seating, and you can do fidgets, and you can do weighted items. These all have reasons as to why they help someone regulate, and they help children with different sensory processing or different things that they need supports for. This is a wide variety. So you can do headphones. It's an easy place to start. We have headphones on the way into our dining room service, you know, like the fancy church upstairs, high church. We still want children to be able to worship. So one of the things that we do at every entrance is we have a coat stand that's like a kid-size one, and we have headphones on it. And we don't care what child uses an item. We don't police the sensory room. We don't police the sensory items. Any child can use them. And then somebody asked me, well, do all these things walk off? And that's not a problem I have in my context. We have a all done bin, and they get put back in there. Upstairs in your Sunday school classrooms, if you're doing VBS, the fluorescent lights, how many people have fluorescent lights? Can be really hard for some kids, and you can't dim it. So you can actually buy these magnetic covers that go on lights. You can put them up for VBS and then take them down, things like that. There are all sorts of tools out there, and here's the thing, schools are using them. How many people flew into the Pittsburgh airport? I figure almost everyone, but a lot of people in the room. Some people may have driven. There is a sensory room at the Pittsburgh airport. At our zoo in Oklahoma City, there is a sensory room. At football stadiums and basketball auditoriums, they are starting to put in sensory rooms, and yet our churches are slow to do it. Now, I'm not saying that that's what you have to do in your context. I'm just saying sometimes, if we see it out in the world, it might need us to say, what could I do in my context to offer that same support? You might do buddy bags or other things. So grab me later. Happy to talk to you about your one-on-one. One of the easy things, too, that you can do is your bulletin. If you have friends, all those who have know someone with dyslexia, raise your hand again. There was a lot. So you can do an open dyslexic font, and it is a font that is easier to read, and it's free. You can do visual schedules in your Sunday school rooms to help children know to plan transition. You can use egg timers as well, a buddy system, and you can use communication boards if you have anyone who's non-speaking individuals. But let's talk about specifically, what about an event? All right, get ready to move. Here's the fun stuff. So we're gonna use an Easter egg hunt. I want you to think about an Easter egg hunt. What words come to mind? Chaos. Thank you. Who said that? Who said that? A lot of people. Okay. Well, so right now, I want you to all stand up. To those online, you're going to watch what happens. Okay? You're going to watch what happens. All right. So everybody, you may have noticed gold eggs when you came in. When you go find a gold egg, not only do you find it, you have to open it up. And you're going to close it back up, okay? Open it. If it doesn't have what I'm going to tell you in a moment, if it doesn't have it, you're going to close it back up and put it down. It's to make this a little bit more chaotic and harder, okay? In one of those eggs, there's $40 cash. Not kidding, $40. Someone gets to leave their workshop with $40. You get to find it. But when you open the egg, if there's not $40 in there, you're going to close that egg up, okay? Until someone says, hallelujah, that means they found the cash, okay? And then everybody take the eggs with the other item that's inside, because I don't want to take them on the airplane. So ready? If you're at your table back here, you might want to move and get up front. It's chaos. So ready? On your mark, get set, go. $40, people, $40, cash. Oh, there's not enough noise. Keep going, keep going. Someone's going to find it. No, it's there. Keep going, keep going. Someone keep going. Hallelujah, woo! All right, everybody take the little Jesuses. Come back to your seat for a second. Are we had an hallelujah for those who are watching online? All right, I don't know if that was enough chaos. There was certainly a high intensity going on. Maybe it wasn't as loud as some egg hunts happen to be, right? Was it competitive? Do you feel like your egg hunts for your kiddos are competitive? Yes. Are they crowded? Yes. Are they a little bit unpredictable? Have you ever seen a child who has not been happy because they did not get eggs? Yes. I had a child at one of our events before we started doing sensory friendly who they were trying to get only one color. They wanted to get their favorite color. And so by the time they were done, they only got like 2 eggs, and like someone else would have like 100 eggs, right? So competitive, crowded, unpredictable. And you know what else? Egg hunts have social rules, like they are rule heavy. A start time, and then like the kids just, it's like unspoken rules, but like they kind of run, and then fast transitions, and then there's these expectations. Some kids want as many eggs as possible. So it's high sensory. So you can write that down. Some of your events are high sensory events. Now, high sensory events are not wrong. High sensory events are not wrong. They're a lot of fun, but they can be balanced. And so you're not going to, when you think of sensory-friendly, neuro-affirming ministry, you're not offering a special program designed for a few, but you're relooking at some of your beloved traditions and events with a new lens of awareness. And you then can design programs in a way that benefits everyone, maybe just starting with some adaptations or choices. So I want you to think, how can I offer a traditional event in a new way so that we can include some more children that we're trying to serve? So I want you to think about that. Think about your traditional egg hunt and that chaos. And if you're online, I invite you to go grab a cup of coffee, tea, take a bathroom break, or you can watch. We're going to reset the room. Now I'm going to have you experience a sensory-friendly hunt. So what I need is a few people to help Brianna put out all the colored eggs really quickly, okay? And if you're not going to help her put out the eggs at your table, you can talk about some ways that you might adapt an egg hunt. Okay? That this way we can transition really fast if a few people. All right. So I'm going to go back so you could see the question that was at the, it wasn't at the bottom of the slide. All right, so for those at your table, how many of this is your experience of an egg hunt in your church? So talk a little bit about what the chaotic things are that you can't control at your egg hunt, why they set the next one. All right, it looks like they are, I think, almost set up. So if you look at your table on your handouts, you're going to need this card, okay? And here's the thing about sensory, that we're using this as a case study, okay? This is a case study of what I could do in this environment. So as you think about egg hunts, if you were doing a sensory-friendly egg hunt, there are 4 or 5 options that are kind of circulating in the internet and church spheres and community events and at schools. One, if you flip over, would be a hunt that is done by, this list or a similar list. And that you could have a grid pattern. If you're at a church with a smaller context, a grid system allows a child to have a square to collect the eggs like this, and they kind of do a scavenger hunt, and you could make the list smaller. If you're online, we're going to get you this form. Someone could hold it up to the camera maybe. But basically, a grid system is marked out with chalk or painter's tape, and a child is told they can hunt in that space. And if you have a big park or we have a big green space by us, that's a possibility. When you have 100 kids coming to your event, that's less than doable. If you had a smaller group of kids, a grid system works well. So today we have about 30 people in the room, so we're going to do an example of a color-coded egg hunt. And because you all are in the room and we don't have a big space, I made it a little hard because 2 of your colors are very close together. So you're going to go on a hunt, and I'm going to want you to find a egg hunt in each color. Now, obviously, the blue, the green, the red are pretty obvious, but you have an orange and a peach that the color variation is a little different. I did this for 2 reasons: to make the egg hunt harder for you all, but also to give you an example that when you buy things on Amazon, you might have an unintended consequence for your little kiddos, right? Or your youth, because now you're doing your color code sheet, and a child might go, well, I thought I was getting the orange. So you want to be careful how you set it up. An example would be your pink sheet on your table is another example. Again, online, we'll get you these. The pink sheet shows you those eggs, when they found them and they cracked them open, they took them to sensory bin and activities with craft tables. So if you had a child where the 2 colors were the same, they might not get to craft table B because they kept finding the eggs for craft table C because the colors were so close. But these are a couple different ways that you could do an egg hunt. So we're going to experience this egg hunt, and one of the things with an egg hunt for sensory friendly is you want to be thinking about your pacing and your time, and to make things less chaotic and overwhelming. So one of the things is clear signage and transitions. So your signage here is that when your table's invited to hunt, you're going to go find 1 egg in every color off the sheet, and you're going to take whatever time it takes to do the task. If you prefer to observe or stay at your table, you're welcome to do so. When you do a sensory-friendly option at your church, try to give options. Not everyone wants to participate. You may have families show up who fully participate to do the egg hunt, and then the child is having a moment where they're having trouble to self-regulate, and that family may decide that they want to stand and watch instead. And so maybe you have a bag of eggs already to give them to take home. But that's why you have an option, is you want to build in some options. So we're going to start with these 2 tables closest to the window. You're welcome to go do your egg hunt and use your card. Please take the eggs home with you. I don't want to take them back on the airplane, or give them to a friend who drove, and they can use them at their egg hunt in the future. So everyone else, if you'll observe what's happening and how it's different than before. Same with online, if you'll watch how it's a different experience. All right, the middle 2 tables, you're welcome to go hunt. There's no money, I'm sorry, in this hunt.
If you end up with eggs left that you don't want, and you want me to do it, I'm saying I can take a drove. We have 10. And I can take them to my son's school, who's neurodiverse at St. Francis School, and then use them for free.
Great,
So
I love it.
you'd be happy to
That'd be great. I'll make it announcement. There we go. I have other ones in the listing, so I'd rather do that.
I'll just give you some and you don't use them.
Yeah.
If that would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because then they could just fill them and use them.
And I can get it.
I have a bag. Okay. All right, the last table, you can do your hunt. Okay, it looks like hopefully everybody got to do their egg hunt. So as you're opening your eggs, please keep all those gifts. Those gifts are for you. Okay, all those gifts are for you. If you don't want your eggs, will you raise your hand, Mary? If you don't want your eggs, Mary said she would take the empty eggs. Keep your prizes. She'll take the empty eggs. She drove, and she has a place that will use them. If you want to use your eggs, please keep them, but please take your, unless you don't want your items, keep your items. They're a gift for you. And then I'm going to give Mary a bag, and she's going to take the eggs. Okay, so now I want you to think about this event. Again, this is a case study, right? So did you notice that doing the hunt in that way, the sensory overload was lessened? It was, do you agree that it was not as overwhelming, or there wasn't as much confusion? You had the choice to opt out if you needed. So one way that when you're doing these events, you're communicating that observers are welcome, that participation can look different in many ways. You could join when you're ready. You may hunt with a buddy. These are things you might say. You can take breaks, or quiet space is available. And basically, you're creating a space where families should not feel like they have to apologize, explain, or justify their children's behaviors, okay? So if you look at the front graphic. I mean, this is my experience often. So I overheard, I was eavesdropping to the front table. The way my church does the sensory-friendly event is we do 2 egg hunts. We do an egg hunt on Easter. That is this first picture with the kid having about, like, that is always happens. We have our mass chaos egg hunt, the old tradition. We offer the new tradition, the other picture, on the Saturday before, and we reach out to the Children's Hospital, to Oklahoma Autism Network. We post it up in our neighborhoods, and we do it as a community event, but we let families know that it is sensory friendly. And we don't turn anyone away. If a family showed up and they were thinking it was going to be a normal egg hunt, we explain the difference. And we've done several different ones with, that pink sheet where they had experiences where they could do crafts and things as a family. And then we have had just the color-coded egg hunt. And we also have a fenced-in area, even on our really crazy one where we try to still have, if someone didn't get the word, a little lower key, but it's still kind of the chaotic. So we chose not to do one and have everyone just do sensory friendly because we're at a big church, right? So if I have 100 kids, it's still going to be chaotic. So our choice, our committee decided to do 2. It doesn't take me, other than maybe making sure I have one staff person or a volunteer, it doesn't take a lot more to do the sensory hunt on a different day. And the reward I've gotten for my context is huge. And I have families who would never come on Easter. Easter's too much for them. And so this is the one way that they have entry into some of the traditions and until we got our sensory-friendly worship service up. But our feedback from those who come to our sensory-friendly is without this, I've stopped going to the big egg hunts. It's not worth it for my family because that they're gonna have fallout from that event, and then it's gonna trail into everything else that week. So just something to consider. So really quickly, take 2 minutes, and I'm gonna really watch the time. Take 2 minutes at your table about how that experience was, the pacing, the predictability, noise reduction, just how it felt to experience the 2 side by side. So what felt different? And just at your tables really quick and online. Okay. So as you consider your egg hunts, also consider what's inside of them. You might do stickers and fidgets and not chocolate that melts. I mean, that's up to you. There's ways to be aware of also the items you're providing in your eggs and then how you set up your environment. So up on the board, because we're using that, was a case study. So here is just a highlight as you look at your events at your church. And you could take a picture of that. But here's an example of if you used that sheet. Remember, part of it is to use the sheet. That to those online, we will send you the PowerPoint. Use that sheet to plan your events. It will help you do things like this, right? So that piece of paper, church programs and seasonal event planning tool, right? The tool in your toolkit until it becomes like second nature. It helps you kind of think through some of these things. You don't have to do all of them. You might just start with headphones, or how many people have a sport pop-up tent for like tailgating tent? So you could use a tailgating tent and an outdoor event that creates a sensory-friendly space. You put a beanbag chair in it, you put up a couple of the walls, and you have a space that's a place apart with some sensory tools and fidgets. So some of it is like before we used to do potlucks and events, like a picnic outside, we never used to put up a sensory space. Well, it's a pretty easy thing to do, bubbles, different things like that. And most people in your congregation already have a tent like that. Some cities have trucks that you can rent. Like they go to birthday parties and things, it's a sensory-friendly truck, and you find out if that's in your city, and your committee might be willing to pay for that. But you also can do things yourself, and that's what this slide represents. So in the background, you see one of the tents provided in a different kind of path. I will fully disclose that was AI. So, but you would do staggered start times in small groups, clearly marked zoned. You would train your volunteers. This is an example of color matching. Here's an example of a sensory tent that's near there along with items. So it's just, again, trying to provide spaces for regulation, quiet spaces, tents like this, they're not punishment or timeout. If you have a sensory room at your church, it's not punishment or timeout. It's giving a space for a child to self-regulate. So what you're really doing is helping your church shift from come as long as you behave culture to come and belong as you are culture. Let's say it again. You're helping your church change your culture from come as long as you behave culture to come and belong as you are culture. And so that is hospitality. It's not charity. It helps neurodivergent families who often avoid special events or opt out quietly or watch from the edges or skip Easter, in this case with our egg hunt scenario. It allows them to have options and to choose what works for their family. So it is helping your church realize that sometimes the old ways need to make way for the new way. And we use this today as a case study, but you could apply this, again, if you use that tool I gave you, to start taking those lenses to all the events that you are doing in your church and make small changes. You may say at this event, I'm going to have clear signage, an option to be opt-out, headphones. You might have an event where you go, VBS, we're going to put a sensory room in because I don't have enough volunteers to do a whole sensory-friendly VBS, right? You're going to cater it and craft it to your culture and to where your church is. So here's an example of taking that tool and giving examples of consent and choice and permission to step away, how a committee or a group of people may have worked through that worksheet, and some adaptations that they were coming up with that they would apply. This is a sample. There are many ways to do it. I just wanted to give you an example. I worked a committee through the sheet, and this is some of their answers, okay? Yes, yeah. I will send it out, if not in the couple days, like right away, I promise within a week you will get it, okay? Trying to catch that flight with the storm and not knowing where we're going to get stuck, so you will get it, I promise. We have all your emails. If you signed up late, make sure just write down your email. I should have everybody's email in the room and online, but that way I can ensure you get this, okay? So again, continuing into Easter as a sample. So one way you would think is, what part of Easter creates the most stress for families who are neurodivergent in your context? All right, VBS. VBS is one of those very high sensory ones, right? So VBS does not need to be quieter for everyone, but it does need to be flexible for some. And so here's an example of a group working through the sheet and talking about some challenges that they identified and some adaptations. So are you kind of seeing how you might use that tool in your context, working through the events? Again, that's this sheet, okay? All right, so here's the same thing, worked with the committee. This is some of the ones that they identified. I'm not giving you all of them because they had created a lot, but this was just some highlights if they were doing Advent and Christmas. Children's Christmas pageants, high sensory input event. Often can be considered forced participation if a child had been in a role, and then that day, as it's too much on that day, you know, you might have to have a different plan for Mary. So one thing that you can do is when children know that they can step away and still belong, they're more likely to engage. And when families have permission that they know that you're going to be flexible and that you're providing supports alongside them, they know that they're more likely to engage and participate, especially if you have a plan B. So which season feels most accessible in your context? Like if you were doing an event, what is an event you do right now that has the lowest sensory input levels, right? It's the calmest. Do you offer a calm event? Anybody right now? So speak up. Can you Godly play. Godly play brings in a lot of tools of awareness and allows for self-regulation. What? Oh, sorry, go ahead. We do sacred play was an answer, which is similar. Okay, what season in the life of your church feels most overwhelming? Easter. Christmas and Easter was what I heard. So I want you on your paper to write, and online, please do this too, and online you can share it with your friends who are online. What is one adaptation you could pilot this year? If you don't have that answer now because you haven't gone through that worksheet, you can table it. But I want you to leave here thinking about homework of one adaptation you could maybe pilot this year. Because again, what did I say? It's not about creating perfect programs, and it's not about like getting rid of your beloved traditions. It's about redesigning with care, curiosity, and compassion to try to adapt in ways that are realistic for your congregational context. So you might then bring to your committee or your head of staff or your church team, could you add these sensory-friendly principles to one or two events in your church year? And then that's a place to start. So you start with one or two, and then you try to do more. All right, so we are wrapping up. And I just want you to remember this little boy that, again, thank you, Chat GPT. So I want you to remember that when you provide supports, you're providing care, and that what I have found in my context is some kids and families that I never knew needed the supports. Not only do they use them, they've come back to us to tell us how thankful they are for them. As simple as putting out headphones is where we started, and a basket of fidgets. I want you to think about your congregational context and this idea of neuro-affirming ministry adaptations. That when you're doing this, you're choosing welcome that's lived out and felt, not just spoken. I'm gonna say it again. So we always say like, hey, everyone's welcome here, right? That's spoken. But you're choosing then to start beginning offering a welcome that's lived out and felt. Lived out and felt, that's really important. So as we prepare to close, I want you to think. You can close your eyes. You can just think about it. If you're online, you could choose to share it or not in the thread. That's up to you. But who is the child or family that you're picturing right now that you know that would benefit from this? Who is the child or family that you would picture right now in your head that would be glad that you started doing this? And imagine what it would look like to say, we planned this for you. When you talk to your church, expecting all children the same age to learn the same materials in the exact way is like ask the same children to all wear the same size shoes. So as you leave today, think about who will benefit from these kind of changes in your ministry. Think about who the key stakeholders are in your congregational context that you can call upon to help begin making some of these changes or work through this sheet with you. And how these changes offer hope. And we're going to end with a short video. How do these changes offer hope?
So we are the Solomon family, and I actually work here at the church. We are all a little neuro-spicy, I guess you could say. It is something that is just woven into the fabric of who we are. It has allowed us to have a different rhythm and way of viewing things. Church can be hard, I think, probably because it's just set up for your neurotypical people in general. It can be hard to, get through the door even sometimes.
Well, my name is Sally Pollock. I work here at Westminster Presbyterian Church as one of the staff keyboard players. It took me a very long time to accept the fact that my child had autism. But once I accepted it and took advantage of all of the great early interventions, I've realized that it's a joy and I would not have it any other way.
I am Zachary, and you could call me Zach. I would just say I have autism, and I would say to them, autism means that you think differently. I like to drive around because it's fun. I love listening to rock and rap music. If there's a song that I really love that's playing, I enjoy it. And I didn't want to drive in the first place, but now I changed my mind and got so confident.
Hi, I'm Jane Sutter. Our son Ben, who's now 38 years old, he struggled as a young child in some ways, and it was actually his middle school special ed teacher who said, I think he has Asperger's. He obviously is on the high end of the autism spectrum, is very, very bright, but had some challenge just socially and just kind of figuring out life in a different way.
Hey, I'm Ben. I went to college at UCO, have a bachelor's in sound design and music production. Neurodiversity is people who process the world differently. Don't box people in because they have a diagnosis or a label. There's more differences between people than there are, diagnoses.
I'm David Sutter. Yeah, I'm very excited about the neurodiverse programs that we're trying to start. I think it's high time, and I think a lot of parents are going to be very excited about it. The way that you react as a parent, the way you react as an instructor, or even around somebody neurodiversity is much different. It took me too long to pick up on that.
So neurodiversity is the understanding that there are natural variances or variations of the brain. Not everyone is the same all the way across. And it's understanding that it's just a different wiring in the brain.
That word diversity is the big word, particularly when you think of people on the spectrum, how they are nurtured and encouraged and welcome is really different.
I really was amazed when we had a group of kids all on the spectrum. That group got to know one another, and I think they realized, hey, we all have issues, and I was amazed how accepting they were of one another.
I remember him being in the back seat of the car, just going through the books of the Bible. I can't name them, but he was naming them perfectly. But he probably didn't know the name of his Sunday school teacher. So to me, that was just kind of a difference in the way he absorbed his environment. Ben's passion is music, and he loves music and writing music and mixing music, and there are lots of ways to connect with him.
I'm working as an audio engineer at a studio. I edit and mix podcasts mostly.
I think having this education to help educate those people who are working with the kids as to how to adapt, not necessarily change things, because you don't want to change the world for these kids. They have to adapt to the world. The therapy dog, and you have a group of adults who are there who are just like, hey, bring yourself, whatever you need to do, move around a little bit, or whatever you say is okay, you're welcomed. He could just be himself, and I don't have to worry about what he's gonna say or how he's gonna act, and people kind of getting that deer in the headlights look in their eyes that I can sense from a mile away.
Because I do the greeting for the people downstairs, and they're nice to me.
For us right now, knowing that there's a place that we can go if it gets too much, we can come in here in the sensory room, whatever, there's headphones available. And now that we have the new service, there's a place that we can move. I think the shift that we've seen here has been really beneficial.
Watching his abilities be seen and be fostered, that wasn't there 10 years ago. So I do have a lot of hope.
I like my family the most because my dad taught me how to cook and taught me how to drive really well. And my mom taught me how to tie shoes.
If there was one thing I could ask faith communities to do, it's to listen to the people that are living this daily and meet them where they are.
Just be patient with people. just be accepting, I suppose.
Kindness, gentleness, forgiveness, and the ability to let go. And it's not about me, it's about somebody who's not perceiving things the way that I do.
Churches want to be there for you, but sometimes they don't know how to be. And so whenever you can lovingly and gently kind of guide them in the direction that's going to be best for your child and other children that are neurodiverse, it makes it better for the people that come after you too. Seeing her get ready in the morning and ready to come to church gives me hope too. And the fact that she wants to be here, which has not always been the case. And so knowing that she feels loved and safe and a sense of belonging is probably what gives me hope.
Just to help kids connect with other kids, and whatever that looks like, and how to make that happen where they feel like they're part of a church family, where they don't just feel like they're part of our family going to church, that they internalize being part of this church family, because I believe that's what God wants us to be.
All right, well, that ends our time, and thank you for being hope bearers in the world, and thank you for taking the time to learn about Neuroaffirming Ministry. We will follow up. Come see us at the table. We'd love to give you some free goodies. If you were here today, come see us. We'll have you scan a QR code, and we're going to send you a free sensory resource box to you. So come see us at the table, because I don't have time to do it now. So we're in the expo hall. Find Brianna, find me, and we will pull out the magic golden ticket for you. Okay? Thank you.